Natasha and Her Illegitimate Child in a Muslim Society. A novel by Dr. A. Ahmed. This story is narrated in 2 books. Book 1. Copyrights. All rights are reserved. No part of this book may be reproduced, stored in a retrieval system, or transmitted in any form or by any means without the prior written permission of the author, except by a reviewer who may quote brief passages in a review to be printed in a newspaper, magazine, school journal, or university article. This novel is a work of fiction, but the entire story is based on the actual life of a Muslim family in Sudan. Therefore, all names, characters, places, and incidents are either the product of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, events, or locales is entirely coincidental. Chapter 52. The DNA Test. After her inquiry has been interrupted with that unsatisfactory end, Natasha decided to drop the devilish idea and believe that the loving and righteous God would not put her in such a disgraceful condition of marrying and having a child with her own brother. She knew that her Muslim father is an evil person and what he had done to her is against God. His evil deed is the work of Satan whom he is worshipping from childhood. But her Christian husband is following the Lord from childhood, and therefore the good Lord would not allow him to commit such an abomination of uncovering the nakedness of his own sister and fathering a baby with her. Despite Natasha coming to that religious conclusion, still her incomplete inquiry affected her married life. Whenever her husband sleeps with her, she feels a strong sense of guilt that causes her to feel as if someone is inflicting terrible pain inside her body and heart. Such an ugly feeling began to prevent her from enjoying sex with her husband. Ever since that doubt arose in her mind, Natasha always kept asking herself during her sexual intercourse with her husband whether the man I am having sex with him now is my own brother or not. And that question always kills her mood and turns her into a body without any feeling for sexual pleasure. Natasha knew that she would not be able to continue her married life with those tormenting worries. She wants to know whether she fell in love and married her brother or not. But no matter how hard she tried, she could not find an answer to that persistent question. After many days of pondering on that tenacious question, Natasha thought of an idea which she expected might solve her problem. She remembered that she had her family album, which she inherited from her loving grandfather. In that album, she has a family photo that contained her late mother Natasha, her Russian grandmother Nadia Alexandrov, and her Sudanese grandfather Sami Shams al-Din. She thought that, if she showed that family photo to her mother-in-law, then that insistent question might be answered. She expected that Mrs. Mary Morgus might recognize her mother, the late Natasha, and her mother's parents. The photo showed her mother when she was probably 13 or 14 years old. There is no date on the photo to help her to know the exact age of her mother when that photo was taken. There are other few photos of her late mother, but they were all taken when she was a small girl in Moscow, Russia. Before showing that family photo to Mrs. Mary Morgus, Natasha went to a photo studio and enlarged the picture. Then she put it in a beautiful frame and hung it in the living room. She did that before tea time. After that, she waited for Mrs. Mary Morgus to see it. When tea time came and her mother-in-law spotted that photo hanging on the wall, Natasha observed her carefully and waited to see her reaction. Mrs. Mary Morgus looked at the photo for a while and then asked Natasha whether those people were her mother and grandparents. Yes, mother, responded Natasha quickly and continued to watch Mrs. Mary Morgus' face carefully. Natasha could not be able to discern anything to confirm her doubt. She saw Mrs. Mary Morgus kept staring at the photo as if she had never seen her family members before. Natasha stood up and went to the photo. These are my grandfather, Dr. Sami Shams al-Din, my Russian grandmother, Nadia Alexandrov, and the one in the middle is my late mother, Natasha Sami Shams al-Din. Was your mother unmarried when that photo was taken? Before Natasha could answer her first question, Mrs. Mary Morgus asked her another question. Where is your father's photo? Natasha found herself in a difficult situation when Mrs. Mary Morgus asked her the second question. She is not prepared for that question at all because she has no photo of her father in her family album. She knows the reason for the absence of her father's photo, but how could she reveal such a family secret to her mother-in-law? She decided to ignore the first question and answer her second question. This is because she knew her late mother never got married, although she delivered 2 children with the same man. I don't have any photos for my father. I do not know why there is not a single photo of my father in our family album. Have you ever seen your father? No. Did your grandparents tell you what your father's name is and what is his tribe? I am always carrying the last name of my grandfather, Shams al-Din. My grandfather told me that my mother, father, and grandmother died in a car accident when I was a few days old. Mrs. Mary Morgus looked at Natasha with an angry face and said to her, "But you had told me that your father is in the city of Calgary and looking for you to kill you because you left Islam and married my Christian son. Why do you always say your father died in a car accident when he is still alive?" Natasha is perplexed and remained silent for a while before she said shyly, "I always tell the people that my father died because my father is a bad man and hates me and wants to kill me. I don't consider him my father anymore. On our wedding day, he sent terrorists inside the reception hall and blew up 550 innocent guests. Even my loving grandfather was killed on that fateful day. Only my husband and I had miraculously escaped that cowardly terrorist attack. I am sad to hear that your father is such a ruthless and dangerous Muslim terrorist. I am also sorry for the loss of your loving grandfather. Still, if you have his photo, I would like to see it. I don't have his photo, and I don't think I will ever keep his picture if I find it anywhere. At least tell me his name." His evil name is Sheikh Yasser Saif al-Din. His name sounds like a Muslim leader of the terrorist group of either ISIS or Al-Qaeda. After making that comment, the shrewd Coptic woman smiled and remained silent. Natasha felt great relief when her mother-in-law accepted her explanation and believed her words. However, the memory of her loving grandfather caused hot tears to fall on her cheeks. Therefore, she excused herself, ran to her bedroom, and closed the door behind her. Then, she fell in her bed and began to weep for the loss of her grandfather. Nonetheless, Natasha was not satisfied with the outcome of her family photo. She felt that Mrs. Mary Morgus was trying to hide something from her. Why did she show great interest in seeing the photo of her father when she had been told that he is a heartless terrorist? Who would like to see the photo of the person who mercilessly slaughtered many innocent people, including children? The interest of Mrs. Mary Morgus in seeing the photo of her father made her desire to find the truth increase higher than it was before the family photo displayed in the living room. Natasha thought that the only explanation of such interest is that her mother-in-law wanted to see the photo of her son's father. Such a conclusion led Natasha to suspect the honesty of Mrs. Mary Morgus. It seemed as if she had already discovered the blood relationship between her and her husband, but pretended to know nothing. Most probably, she doesn't want her beloved son to make such an awful discovery of marrying his own sister. Now, Natasha is tormented by her new doubt about the honesty of Mrs. Mary Morgus, and that added to her agony. Her conscience is torturing her day and night. She spent many weeks struggling with the possibility of being married to her own brother. The only person who could answer that question is Mrs. Mary Morgus. But for Natasha, now the honesty of Mrs. Morgus became questionable. After her efforts to get an answer to her question became fruitless, Natasha decided to do a sibling DNA test. Before carrying out a DNA test, she did a quick search on the internet through her computer and came to know that a sibling DNA test, without their biological parents available for testing, might not be conclusive. When the issue of siblingship is in question, the recommended method to determine whether individuals are true biological siblings is to test their parents. DNA paternity and maternity testing will provide conclusive results of 99.9% accuracy. However, in situations where the alleged parents are unavailable for testing, a DNA siblingship test can be performed to analyze the relationship of biological siblings. It is more than possible to test the siblings on a DNA comparison to work out whether there is a relationship there. Although Natasha came to know that the sibling DNA test results would not be 100% reliable, and it could give only a probable answer, still she decided to do the test. A DNA sibling test compares the genetic material, DNA, of one person to that of another person to determine the likelihood that they are related biologically as siblings. In most cases, sibling tests are performed to determine paternity, whether or not the two individuals have the same biological mother. This often happens in situations where the possible father is deceased, incarcerated, unwilling, or otherwise unavailable to participate in a paternity test. Natasha approached a clinic that does the test for everyone without a requirement of a court order. She informed the clinic that she is dating a guy, and she suspects that he might be her biological brother. For that reason, she wants to do a sibling DNA testing without his knowledge. The clinic agreed to conduct the test, but she is told that the result could not be used in any court of law for deciding any legal issues. Also, she is told that the result would not be conclusive. She has to expect two possibilities, positive or negative. In the case of the first result, her boyfriend could be with high probability her biological brother, and in the case of the second result, he could be with high probability, not her brother. The clinic informed Natasha that, if she wants to get an accurate and conclusive result of 99.9% certainty, then she should involve one or both of her parents. Natasha told the clinic that she cannot be able to involve her parents because her mother was deceased when she was a small child, and her biological father is a terrorist leader living abroad in a dangerous Muslim country called Somalia. Therefore, she has no contact with her evil father, and she has cut all her ties with him. The clinic staff never bothered to verify her claim or refer it to the police. They just asked her to pay the fees and fill in the consent form. Natasha filled in and signed the consent document and gave a sample of her DNA through a swab that inserted in her mouth. Since her boyfriend is not supposed to know about the test, she is asked to bring his toothbrush for collecting samples of his salvia that contained suitable cell samples, including loose cells from his cheeks. Natasha followed the order of the clinic and smuggled her husband's toothbrush without his knowledge. Then, she waited for 2 weeks before she got the result of that sibling DNA testing. Sadly, the DNA testing result revealed with high probability that her husband is her biological brother. The positive result of the DNA test has assaulted Natasha as if it is a major heart attack and made her drop lifeless inside the clinic. The clinic management dialed 911 and called the police. That day, Natasha is rushed to the hospital by an ambulance. At first, the hospital authority thought that the unconscious girl had a heart attack. But when she was revived and properly diagnosed, the doctor understood that the patient collapsed and fainted due to the impact of great shock. Such a problem usually happened to people who heard unpleasant news, such as the sudden death of a child or a dear one. Sometimes, a life partner or a lover might experience a similar situation when he or she caught his spouse or lover in bed with another man or woman. When Natasha got discharged, she refused to reveal either to the hospital staff or to the police authority the reason that caused her to fall and become unconscious inside the DNA test clinic. But the clinic informed the police of the actual reason, which led to her great shock and collapse inside their clinic. Even so, the police authority didn't detain her and allowed her to return to her apartment as if there was nothing that had happened to her. Chapter 53. She is becoming the scapegoat. While that restless, abominable inquiry is going on, Wahid suspected the behavior of his wife and questioned her about it. Natasha hid her problem and denied it. She told him she is stressed out because of her studies. Nonetheless, Wahid understood that there was something bothering his wife, but he could not figure out what it was. He noticed that his wife is not so much interested in making love with him as she used to be before. A slight doubt arose in his mind, but he dismissed it. Natasha began to show discomfort whenever he slept with her. Her responses to sex have made him feel as if he is raping her. He is worried that his wife might be in love with someone else. He shared his doubts with her, but Natasha strongly denied she is in love with any man other than him. Anyhow, after the sibling DNA test result confirmed her blood relationship with her brother, Natasha stopped having sex with him. She always makes some excuses for not making love with him. Wahid decided not to bother her anymore. He shares with her the bed without any physical contact. He talks to her rarely. Natasha decided to have a fake love affair in order to terminate her abominable marital relation with her brother. She wanted to break up with him without letting him know the actual reason. She determined to be the scapegoat and take the blame alone. Natasha knew that her brother had been made to suffer a lot in his life, and she did not want him to suffer again for those stupid moral mistakes of their biological parents. She thought it was her turn to suffer for the wrong actions of her parents. She blamed her grandfather Sammy Shams Aldine and grandmother Nadia Alexandra for taking their daughter Natasha to that orphanage and forcing her to give birth to her illegitimate son, and then abandoned him forever. She wondered why her loving grandfather had not abandoned her, but he abandoned his grandson Gergis Gabriel. Why did he take care of his granddaughter and loved her all the days of his life, but did not take care of and love his grandson? Why did her Russian grandmother agree to throw her grandson as if he was contaminated with a disease or a scandal? Why did her grandfather never mention to her that she has a brother? Why had her loving grandfather hardened his heart and abandoned a child that had equal rights to him as she had? Those questions troubled her conscience and made her suffer from insomnia. After that awful discovery, she could hardly sleep at night. Natasha began to leave her apartment in the morning and would not return until late evening. She spent the time roaming aimlessly in malls and public parks. Many times, she didn't go to her college and escaped her classes. She stopped having that tea time and Sudanese zalabia cookies with Mrs. Mary Morgus. She began to pretend that she was having a secret love affair with one of her classmates. She brought inside her bedroom fake love letters, gifts, and photos of one of her classmates. She took those photos with that male student in order to make her brother suspect that she has a relationship with another man. She purposely left those love objects on her reading table. She waited for her brother to see them and then accused her of cheating on him. It did not take a long time before her brother confronted her in front of his mother and accused her of having an affair with a Muslim boy in the university. Natasha immediately admitted that she is in love with her classmate, a boy by the name of Omar Hussein. Mrs. Mary Morgus got mad with her and harshly rebuked her. She asked her to break up that shameful love relation and came to her senses. She told her if she did not care about her husband, at least she should care about their 2 children, Nadia and Sammy. Natasha pretended to be adamant and told her mother-in-law that she would not break up with her new boyfriend. Wahid is shocked and does not know what to say to his wife. He could not believe that the girl who is standing before him and shamelessly admitting having an affair with a Muslim boy is his beloved wife, Natasha. While Mrs. Mary Morgus is rebuking her and trying to convince her to cut her relationship with that Muslim boy, Wahid walked out of his apartment without telling anyone where he is going. After an hour, he called his unfaithful wife Natasha on her cell phone and told her that he would not come back to their apartment until she repented, and also, she should ask the Lord to forgive her for sinning against him and against her family. While he is talking to her on the phone, Natasha's heart is bleeding from within. She felt that she had caused so much pain in the heart of the person who showed her nothing except pure love. After revealing his decision to her, he asked her to hand the phone to his mother. When Mrs. Mary Morgus came on the line, her son told her not to leave the house and stay with his wife for the sake of her grandchildren. Unless Natasha asked her to leave, she should not leave. She must remain in the house and take care of her grandchildren. He also requested his mother never to discuss that affair issue with Natasha again. She should consider it a closed chapter. But if his unfaithful wife kicked her out or bring her Muslim boyfriend in the apartment, she should come and stay with him. Although Wahid left his wife still, he is not fully convinced that Natasha could commit such shameful marital unfaithfulness and openly admitting it. He suspects that there must be a mysterious reason which led her to do what she is doing. In the meantime, on that black night, Natasha could not be able to sleep. She wept throughout the night. In the morning, she went to her mother-in-law's room and asked her to forgive her for what she had done. Mrs. Mary Morgus told her that she is ready to forgive her if she would break up that disgraceful friendship with the Muslim boy. Natasha ignored her request and instead begged her to ask her son to come back to the house and she would leave instead. She said she was the one who was supposed to be kicked out of the apartment and not her husband. She is the one who is cheating on him. She proposed to leave 1 child for her husband and take 1 child with her. Mrs. Mary Morgus refused to accept Natasha's request or arrange with her regarding the custody of the children. After leaving the house, Wahid went to the pastor of the Coptic church and shared with him what his wife had done. The pastor welcomed him to stay in his house until he would find accommodation. On the following day, the pastor of the Coptic church and his wife went and talked to Wahid's wife. Natasha once again admitted that she is in love with one of her classmates. Then, she told them that she decided to live separately from her husband. She even said she is planning to file for a divorce. The pastor and his wife tried to convince her that what she is doing is wrong in the eyes of God and might lead her into bad consequences. They told her further that her Muslim boyfriend might convince her even to forsake Christianity and return to her old abominable religion of Islam. Nonetheless, Natasha told them she made up her mind to break up with her husband and she would not change her mind. The unfruitful counseling of the so-called unfaithful wife Natasha by the pastor of the Coptic church and his wife brought the bad news to other believers. It began as an ugly gossip and turned into a nasty rumor. The wife of the pastor informed her circle of women that Nadia Ahmad, the wife of the Sudanese man, Samir Ahmad, fell in love with a Muslim boy from her college. Then, the gossip turned into a story that Nadia Ahmad has already rejected the Lord Jesus Christ and became a Muslim girl again. Some girlfriends of Nadia from the church heard about the abominable story and phoned her. Nadia denied her conversion to Islam, but she admitted the love affair with the Muslim boy. After the matter reached the church, Natasha knew and understood that she would not have a place in that Coptic church anymore. There is nothing more detestable that a female believer could do in that Coptic Christian church than having a love affair with an unbelieving person, especially a Muslim man, or a wife cheating on her husband. Since Nadia Ahmad did those two abominable and unpardonable sins, then she would be treated as a piece of garbage or an outcast, and no one would like to keep a relationship with her again. She might even be excommunicated out of the church. Even if those believers meet her somewhere in a mall or other public places, they would neither greet her nor answer her greetings. Therefore, Natasha never dared to step inside that church again. Her repulsive discovery that her own brother uncovered her nakedness, had sex with her many times, and fathered a child with her affected her Christian faith and caused serious damage to her faith in God. She became a sort of agnostic or atheist like her late grandfather Mr. Sami Shams al-Din and stopped reading her Bible or going to any church. Chapter 54. The Deadly Bloody Honor Feud. It took Mr. Muhammad John 1 year to reach that Coptic Christian church in Toronto City where Natasha used to attend with her family. He started his search in the cities of the province of Alberta and then traveled to the province of British Columbia, moved to the provinces of Saskatchewan and Manitoba, and finally he reached the province of Ontario. Before he finished Ontario and would move to the province of Quebec, he found the girl of his query in the cosmopolitan city of Toronto. Mr. Muhammad John used a false claim in his search for the apostatized daughter of his ex-jail mate Sheikh Yasser Saif al-Din. Everywhere he went he claimed to be carrying sad news as well as bringing good fortune to her. He faked a story, which said that a 70-year-old wealthy business tycoon, Sheikh Yasser Saif al-Din, died in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. The deceased sheikh left behind him properties, factories, and a huger bank balance account. His inheritance estimated to be over $1 billion. Then, Muhammad John claimed to be the personal secretary of the deceased business tycoon, and he is looking for the only child of Sheikh Yasser Saif al-Din, a young woman by the name of Natasha. She is the only person who is entitled to claim the inheritance of her deceased father. Muhammad John informed the leadership of every Arabic or Sudanese church he visited that he got some information about Natasha Sheikh Yasser from a Sudanese church in Calgary that she converted from Islam to Christianity. She also married to a Sudanese Muslim apostatized priest by the name of Pastor Wahid Muhammad Ahmed. For an unknown reason, the couple moved out of Calgary without telling anyone where they are going. Most probably, the couple changed their names and last name. Then Muhammad John would produce the photo of Natasha for her identification in case she had changed her name in order to hide her identity. By the time the terrorist, Muhammad John, reached that Coptic Christian church in Toronto, Natasha had already left the church 6 months ago after she made that sickening discovery of her incestual marriage of her own brother. The leadership recognized the photo of Natasha, but they told the so-called personal secretary of her deceased father that she is known to them by the name of Nadia Ahmad and her ex-husband is called Samir Ahmad. Samir broke up with his wife and divorced her when he discovered that she is cheating on him with a Muslim man. After the family broke up, both Samir and Nadia stopped coming to the church. Furthermore, the church leaders told Muhammad John that the last news they heard about the backslidden Nadia is that she converted to Islam, donned the Islamic hijab, married her Muslim boyfriend, and moved with him out of Canada to the Middle East. As a matter of fact, that is how that nasty rumor had been developed by the believers of that Coptic Christian church after the so-called sinful Sudanese woman, Nadia Ahmad, cheated on her apostate Christian husband Samir Ahmad by falling in love with a Muslim. When the hired killer Muhammad John heard that story, he considered it a victory from his God Allah, who miraculously intervened and prevented the shedding of the blood of the Muslim daughter by her Muslim father. Therefore, he expected that Sheikh Yasser Saif al-Din would double his reward when he would convey to him that good news about his formerly apostatized daughter who forsook her abominable apostasy and became a Muslima again. To ensure his double reward, Mr. Muhammad John added a few things, which are not part of the story that he heard from the leadership of the Coptic Church. He decided to claim that he had met some pious Muslim men and women in Toronto City who knew Nadia personally after she has reconverted to Islam and married her Muslim boyfriend. Those righteous Muslims in front of him swore by Allah by placing their right hands on copies of the Holy Quran that Nadia has completely changed and become one of the most devout Muslim women in Toronto City and entire Canada. She donned the hijab and faithfully is observing all Islamic rituals, praying 5 times in the day, fasting the holy month of Ramadan, and giving zakat to the mosques and the poor Muslims in Toronto. She was pregnant when she flew with her devout Muslim husband to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. The reason for their return to the Middle East is that Nadia and her Muslim husband decided not to live anymore among the sinful and accursed infidels. After performing the Islamic rituals of the Hajj in Mecca and Medina, the couple is planning to travel to Turkey and then smuggle themselves into Syria and join the newly established Islamic Caliphate, which internationally known as ISIS. The terrorist and professional killer Muhammad John expected that Sheikh Yasser might ask him what the name of his daughter's Muslim husband. So, he invented the name Muhammad Ahmed Yassin Taha. He chose those 4 names because they are all the names of the Prophet of Islam. After preparing his half-truth and half-false story, Muhammad John sent it in a big email to Sheikh Yasser Saif al-Din and waited eagerly for his double reward to come. Nevertheless, a couple of months before that big email has been sent, the evil Sheikh Yasser fell in fundamental problem with some Somali terrorist leaders. His excessive obsession of women has led him to forsake and divorce his former 4 wives, the Pakistani in Calgary, the Egyptian wife in Cairo, the Eritrean child bride in Asmara, and the Nigerian girl in Lagos, and look for a set of other 4 wives in Somalia. After he fled from Asmara to Mogadishu, he knew that he would put himself in elevated risk of being arrested and extradited to Canada if he tried to visit any of his 3 wives who are living with his children in Eritrea, Nigeria, and Egypt. Of course, his first wife in Canada became forever out of his reach. Accordingly, he picked up the phone, called his 4 wives one after another, and pronounced their 3 times divorce. He knew that according to the Islamic Sharia, the Muslim husband could divorce his wife or wives any time without giving any reason for her or their divorce. The power to divorce in the Islamic law is in the hands of the husband, and the wife would not be able to divorce her husband unless there is a strong legitimate reason, and that reason should be accepted by the Islamic law, and the divorce should be approved by the judge of the Sharia court. Some of those reasons: she must prove to the judge of the Sharia court that her husband is a gay and openly practicing sodomy with another man, or he is an impotent man and cannot have sex with her, or he has deserted her for over 2 years. He is so poor that he cannot buy clothes for her to cover her nakedness, etc. After divorcing his 4 wives, the notorious polygamist married 4 Somali girls in 1 year time. The youngest wife is 9 years old, and the oldest wife is 15 years of age. Sheikh Yasser picked up those 4 girls from extremely poor Somali families. Those poor families sold their daughters rather than married them to the wealthy Sudanese man. For some time, Sheikh Yasser is satisfied with those 4 underage girls. Nonetheless, his trouble started when he saw one of the wives of another terrorist leader. The woman is one of the most beautiful women that Sheikh Yasser has ever seen in his life. When he saw her, he lusted after her sexy body and coveted her marvelous beauty and charm. By hook or by crook, Sheikh Yasser determined to get that beautiful Somali woman. But he knew and understood that, if he slept with her and got caught, he would be stoned to death according to the Sharia because he is a married man. Sheikh Yasser wished that he is having a license like his prophet. According to his biography, whenever the Prophet Muhammad cast his eyes on a beautiful married woman and he lusted after her sexy body, he could take her from her husband and marry her and have halal sex with her. Her husband, whether he liked it or not, has to divorce her and allow his prophet to marry her. Moreover, the Quran allows each Muslim man to have up to 4 wives at the same time except Muhammad, Surah Al-Nisa 4, verse 3. The Prophet was permitted to have any number of wives, and that is why he had 13 wives at the same time. Therefore, Allah has given no other Muslim man such privilege except his beloved messenger Muhammad. Even so, Sheikh Yasser disclosed his evil intention to one of his Somali personal assistants. His private counselor told him he could get that woman only if her husband is dead and gone to paradise to enjoy his 72 virgins. Accordingly, Sheikh Yasser should never dream of getting that lovely Layla if her husband is alive. But the notorious womanizer Sheikh Yasser knew her husband is younger and stronger than him, and therefore he might live forever or outlive him. Sheikh Yasser is ready to do anything to get that beautiful woman. For very that reason, he decided to get rid of the lovely Somali woman's husband and get her. He accused her husband of being an agent to the West and a spy to the neighboring Christian country, Ethiopia. He then faked some false pieces of evidence and convinced some of his terrorists to get rid of that traitor and enemy of Allah and Somalia. In that way, the men of that Somali husband of that beautiful woman have been invaded, ambushed, and killed by the terrorists of Sheikh Yasser. The dangerous terrorist Sheikh learned that evil idea from the example of Khalid ibn al-Walid. The Egyptian Muslim scholar Sayyid al-Kimni narrates a story of the greatest military commander of the Muslim troops, Khalid ibn al-Walid, one of the 10 Muslims who had been promised by the Prophet Muhammad to enter paradise. Khalid had killed Malik bin Nuwaira, the leader of the tribe of Bani Yarbu, which a large section of the tribe of Bani Tamim, because he had a beautiful wife. According to the story, Malik bin Nuwaira and his men informed Khalid that they were still Muslims. To prove their adherence to Islam, they told Khalid that they had just finished their evening prayer. Khalid ordered them to surrender themselves and lay down their weapons and promised to negotiate the matter with them. When the members of Bani Yarbu tribe surrendered themselves, Khalid ordered his men to kill them all as apostates from Islam. According to al-Kimni, Khalid's motive was to kill the leader of Bani Yarbu tribe, Malik ibn Nuwaira, and take his wife, Layla bint al-Minhal, because she was an exceptionally beautiful woman. Khalid slept with the woman on the same night he killed her husband, and, in that way, he disobeyed the Quran because he did not wait for the Iddah time, which 3 months and 10 days. Likewise, on the same night the Somali man has been killed, Sheikh Yasser took his exceptionally beautiful wife as a war captive and forced her in bed against her wish. While he was raping her, the widow woman was weeping for her murdered husband. But by killing that Somali leader and raping his beautiful wife, Sheikh Yasser started a never-ending honor feud. The brothers of that man heard about the murder of their brother and the nasty allegations that had been falsely laid on him. They came to know that the man who murdered their brother is the one who had raped his wife on the same night he killed him. Accordingly, an internal war began between the men of those angry brothers and the terrorists of Sheikh Yasser. It is one of the bloodiest wars ever fought in that lawless land of Somalia. As many as he lost from his mujahideen, Sheikh Yasser was able to kill many terrorists of his enemies. However, his enemies were able to convince other tribal leaders to join them in fighting against the intruder and evil Sudanese man. When those tribal leaders joined that blood feud, Sheikh Yasser felt his terrorists are outnumbered by those thousands of Somali fighters. Therefore, he understood that his mujahideen would not be able to defeat those Somali numerous tribal men and terrorist leaders who joined hands against him. He decided to flee into the mountains and remain there until the anger of those leaders is pacified. Before he fled, he proposed to ransom his freedom with money, but his enemies rejected his offer of the ransom blood. According to Sharia law, the family of a murdered relative can choose between the execution of the murderer or receiving ransom money. When the relatives of the slain leader refused the money ransom, Sheikh Yasser Saif al-Din with his remaining mujahideen fled to the mountains and hid in caves. However, the resentful brothers and the tribal leaders pursued them and took the fight to the mountains. Once again, Sheikh Yasser has been forced to continue that honor feud. Although he is outnumbered, he continued to fight for his life. Eventually, the notorious womanizer, child abuser, daughter kidnapper and rapist and terrorist, Sheikh Yasser Saif al-Din is raided, ambushed, and taken captive. Those vengeful brothers decided to revenge the blood of their slain brother and the honor of his wife by killing Sheikh Yasser Saif al-Din through the most painful and cruel way the person could ever be killed. They blinded his eyes, broke his legs and hands, and left him in front of his cave to die slowly. Then, they guarded the area surrounding that cave so that no one of his escaping and hiding terrorists could come and rescue him. Those Somali Muslim terrorist leaders have learned that cruel punishment from the example of their holy prophet Muhammad. According to his biography, the Prophet of Islam had punished some Muslim apostates and murderers in the same evil manner. Firstly, the Prophet Muhammad had those men's hands and feet cut off. Secondly, he ordered some nails, which were heated and passed over their eyes, and then he left those blinded and hands and feet amputated men in the Hara, rocky land in Medina. They asked for water, and nobody provided them with water till they died. Sahih al-Bukhari, Volume 4, Hadith number 52. After blinding his eyes and breaking his hands and legs, the wicked sheikh spent 3 days suffering before finally his evil soul departed from his sinful body and descended into hell. Before his death, he suffered from the blazing heat of the sun of Africa during the day, and during the night the mosquitoes and other bloodsuckers sucked his blood. He cried and begged his enemies to shoot him or spare his life by giving him water to drink and food to eat, but instead, they mocked and reviled him. They kept reminding him of the evil that he did to their brother and his wife. During those difficult 3 days, Sheikh Yasser Saif al-Din remembered all those victims he had cheated, abused, tortured, murdered, and the rape of his own daughter. Even so, the evil man did not repent of his many sins. In that cruel way, the wicked Sheikh Yasser Shaitan al-Din died a slow and painful death. After he died, his body is decomposed, and the worms covered it. Then the eagles and the jackals of the air feasted on his stinking flesh. After the ravenous birds consumed his flesh, his enemies came back, poured kerosene on his bones, and set them on fire. And that's how the evil tyrant has been killed and wiped out of existence, and his sinful soul descended into Tartarus and kept in chains in the bottomless pit until he would stand before the white throne of Christ and tried and condemned. Eventually, he would be cast into the lake of fire and spend his eternity with his false prophet, the Antichrist, and Satan and their followers among fallen angels and condemned humanity.